The time is 3:08 a.m. The Strait of Hormuz, 11 nautical miles due south of Qeshm Island, at the precise point where the eastbound traffic separation lane passes closest to the Iranian coastline before the waterway widens into the Gulf of Oman. The water here is 48 meters deep. The current runs northeast at 1.3 knots, and the surface is a flat black mirror reflecting nothing because there is nothing above it to reflect. No moon. A thin overcast pressing down on the navigation lights of a dozen tankers strung out across the eastbound lane, like a slow-moving string of lights on a highway that never closes, carrying oil that will reach refineries in Asia before anyone in this story has filed their after-action reports. The USS Paul Hamilton DDG-60, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, is running eastbound in the traffic separation scheme at 14 knots, positioned as close escort for a Singaporean-flagged VLCC tanker carrying 2.1 million barrels of Saudi crude. This is not a dramatic assignment. Tanker escort through the strait is the operational equivalent of a long drive on a familiar highway. The route doesn't change, the hazards are known, and the primary challenge is maintaining calibrated attention for long enough that nothing catches you by surprise on the rare occasion that something tries. In the Combat Information Center, the 3 a.m. watch had settled into the specific rhythm of deep night operations in the strait. The surface picture was dense. The strait runs between 21 and 34 nautical miles wide at this point, and the traffic separation scheme compresses several $billion of commercial shipping into 2 opposing lanes, which means the radar picture always looks alarming to anyone who hasn't learned to read it. The watch team had learned to read it. 14 contacts, all classified, all on predictable headings and speeds that the Aegis system was tracking with the unblinking patience of software that does not need coffee and does not get bored. The tactical action officer was on his second coffee of the watch, not because the watch was stressful, because it was 3:08 a.m. and the Gulf heat even at this hour of the night produces a specific kind of fatigue that only the combination of air conditioning and caffeine manages reliably. The coffee was, by carrier strike group standards, adequate. By destroyer standards in the strait at 3 a.m., it was exceptional. He was savoring it with the measured appreciation of a professional who knows the next 3 hours are going to look exactly like the last 3 hours and finds, in that predictability, something close to contentment. At 3:09 a.m., the SP-67 surface search radar flagged a new contact. The contact was bearing 357 degrees, almost due north from the direction of Qeshm Island, at a range of 4 nautical miles and closing. Speed 38 knots. Radar cross-section small. Course 205 degrees. Which is to say, directly at the Paul Hamilton, the tactical action officer set down his coffee with the particular care of a man who has decided something is now more important than coffee, which is not a category of thing he encounters frequently. OOD, he said. New contact bearing 357, 4 miles, 38 knots, small RCS. Classification working. The officer of the deck acknowledged with the flat economy of someone who was already pulling up the track on the bridge display. 4 nautical miles at 38 knots is approximately 6 minutes to contact. 6 minutes in the Strait of Hormuz at 3:09 a.m. with a tanker 2 miles astern and a traffic separation scheme that removes a significant portion of the available maneuvering water is a different 6 minutes than 6 minutes in the open ocean. The contact classification resolved 11 seconds after initial detection. Probable Peykaap-II class fast attack craft. Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. The tactical action officer looked at the track. He looked at the bearing. He looked at the closing speed. He picked his coffee back up because 6 minutes was enough time for a sip, and because the Peykaap-II is a specific kind of problem that calls for a specific kind of response, and none of the responses available to him required panic. But 6 minutes was not a lot of time. The Peykaap-II is one of the more honest pieces of equipment in the IRGCN inventory. A 17-meter fiberglass speedboat, top speed 50 knots, armed with a twin 23mm autocannon, and in some configurations, an anti-ship missile launcher aft. Fast, small, cheap, built around the IRGCN's foundational philosophy. If you cannot outgun a warship, get close enough that its range advantages stop mattering. Its radar cross-section is roughly comparable to a large fishing buoy. At 4 nautical miles in the Strait's cluttered picture, it had materialized out of background noise like a thought you weren't expecting. It was not alone. As the combat systems track on the first contact solidified at 3:09 a.m. and 22 seconds, the SPS-67 flagged 2 additional contacts. Both from the north, both from slightly different bearings. One bearing 004, one bearing 349, both making speeds between 35 and 40 knots. Both with radar cross-sections consistent with Peykaap-class vessels. 3 contacts, converging from a 15-degree arc to the north. The center contact pointed directly at the Paul Hamilton. The flanking contacts angled to bracket her from port and starboard. Someone had done geometry homework. Here is where the Paul Hamilton situation requires honest examination, because honest examination is what makes the outcome funny, rather than simply inevitable. The Strait of Hormuz at this location is 21 nautical miles wide between the Iranian and Omani territorial sea boundaries. The eastbound traffic separation scheme occupies the northern third of that width. The Paul Hamilton, running in the separation scheme at 14 knots with a VLCC tanker 2 miles astern, had several categories of maneuvering constraint operating simultaneously. To the north, the 3 inbound contacts, closing at 38 knots from 4 nautical miles. To the south, the westbound traffic separation lane, populated by 3 more tankers on opposing course, which does not constitute a weapons engagement problem, but does constitute a 300,000-ton collision problem if the Paul Hamilton turns hard south at speed. To the northeast, the edge of Iranian territorial waters, 12 minutes away at current course and speed, which is not an immediate problem, but is a navigational boundary that the officer of the deck has logged and is aware of. To the west, astern, the VLCC tanker. Maneuvering room, present but structured. The Paul Hamilton could turn. She could accelerate. She could not do both simultaneously, in all directions. And the engineering watch had handed up a note at 2:57 a.m., starboard shaft showing a minor vibration anomaly, within operational parameters, not requiring action, recommend monitoring. The officer of the deck was carrying that note in his situational awareness. At the same moment, 3 fast attack contacts were resolving on the surface picture. 3 contacts at 38 knots from the north. A starboard shaft anomaly 11 minutes old. Iranian territorial waters to the northeast, opposing commercial traffic to the south, and a tanker astern. The IRGCN had planned around the geography and the time of night. They had accidentally picked a moment when the Paul Hamilton's maneuvering picture was mildly more complex than usual. Mildly, not complicated. Certainly not something the Aegis system found interesting. The Aegis system had already calculated engagement solutions for all 3 contacts within 18 seconds of the 3rd contact's appearance. It was, at this moment, tracking the 3 Peykaap craft with the same automated thoroughness it applied to the VLCC tanker, the opposing commercial traffic, and the navigational hazards at the strait's margins. The system does not distinguish between what is threatening and what is not. It tracks everything equally and presents its tracking to the humans who decide what to do about it. The tactical action officer looked at the 3 tracks, looked at the geometry, and made 3 decisions in approximately the time it takes to read this sentence. First decision: increase speed to 22 knots and come to course 175, turning the Paul Hamilton southeast into the gap between the traffic separation schemes, opening the engagement geometry, and removing the VLCC tanker from the immediate background. Second decision: call the contact report up the chain and notify the tanker on the escort frequency. Third decision: get the SH-60B Seahawk helicopter crew to flight stations. He transmitted the contact report. He passed the course and speed order to the officer of the deck. He picked up the internal phone and passed the word for flight quarters. Then he picked up his coffee because he had made 3 decisions and the coffee was still warm, and this was going to take a few more minutes. The officer of the deck executed the course and speed change with the professional smoothness of someone who has been driving warships long enough that a 15-degree turn at 22 knots in the Strait of Hormuz feels like parallel parking a familiar car. The Paul Hamilton came to 175 degrees and accelerated. The acceleration did 2 things to the geometry. It increased the range rate at which the Paul Hamilton was opening from the northern contacts, buying time, and it moved the ship perpendicular to the flanking contacts' approach vectors, partially defeating the bracketing geometry the 3-boat formation had established. The bracketing geometry had been built for a ship continuing northeast at 14 knots. The ship was now heading southeast at 22 knots. The geometry required recalculation from the IRGCN side. The boats accelerated in response, their own course corrections visible on the Paul Hamilton's surface picture in real time. At 3:11 a.m., the AN/SLQ-32V3 electronic warfare suite flagged something that the tactical action officer found considerably more interesting than the boat tracks. The lead contact, the center boat, the one that had been on the direct intercept bearing from the beginning, had activated a fire control radar consistent with the missile launcher configuration that some Peykaap-II variants carry. Not the 23mm autocannon. The launcher. A brief 3-second activation, enough to sweep the Paul Hamilton's bearing and establish a targeting reference. 3 seconds of fire control radar illumination at 3:11 a.m. in the Strait of Hormuz is a different thing than a fast boat closing at speed. A fast boat at speed can be a harassment. A fast boat with an active fire control radar is a defined threshold in the rules of engagement. The tactical action officer set down his coffee again. This time, he did not pick it back up. "Flash traffic, immediate," he said. 3. IRGCN fast attack. Lead contact active fire control radar. 3-second sweep. Request weapons free on designated hostile. The response from the chain of command, which had been notified 7 minutes earlier and was monitoring the contact report, came back in 41 seconds. Weapons free. At this point, the Paul Hamilton had a weapons-free authorization, 3 fast attack contacts at ranges between 2.8 and 3.4 nautical miles, an SH-60B crew running to their aircraft on the flight deck, and an Aegis system that had been maintaining engagement solutions continuously since the contacts first appeared. She also had the 5-inch Mark 45 gun forward, which can place a 70-pound round on a 17-meter fiberglass target at ranges far beyond the current contact distance with the kind of precision that makes a Peykaap-II's 50-knot maximum speed operationally irrelevant. She also had the SLQ-32, which, in the 42 seconds since the fire control radar activation, had completed a full characterization of the emitter, frequency, pulse width, scan pattern, and was feeding the result to the Aegis threat library in real time. She also, on the unencrypted channel the center boat's crew was using to coordinate with the other 2 contacts, had a voice communication feed that the SLQ-32 signal's intercept capability was capturing, and that the electronic warfare officer was listening to with the focused attention of a man who has just been handed something both operationally relevant and unexpectedly illuminating. The center boat's crew was communicating in clear voice, not encrypted, not even partially obscured. Clear voice on a commercial maritime frequency in a language that the electronic warfare officer did not personally speak, but that the ship's translation capability processed in near real time. The lead boat's commander was telling the other 2 boats to close and get footage of the American ship changing course. That was the mission, not the missile. Not the fire control radar, which had been activated apparently to demonstrate capability for the footage, rather than as preparation for actual employment. Not a boarding action, not a ramming approach, not anything kinetically specific. The mission was footage. The IRGCN commander wanted video of the Paul Hamilton altering course under pressure from his boats, which he would then deliver to the Shore Command facility that would deliver it to the media operation, that would deliver it to Iranian state television as evidence of American vulnerability to IRGCN naval pressure. The electronic warfare officer processed this information for approximately 2 seconds. Then he said to the tactical action officer, in the tone of a man reporting something that is both operationally significant and personally entertaining, "Sir, lead boat is running a video operation. They want footage of us changing course." The tactical action officer looked at the EWO. He looked at the track. He looked at the 3 fast attack contacts, now at 2.6 nautical miles, still closing, the lead boat with its camera apparently running. He thought about this for 3 seconds. "Come to 357, he said. "All ahead, full. 357 degrees is due north, directly at the center contact." The Paul Hamilton turned north and accelerated to full speed. There is a specific visual that a guided missile destroyer at full speed, bow on, makes in the darkness of the Strait of Hormuz at 3:12 a.m. when it turns directly toward you. The navigation lights are visible at several miles. The bow wave, even in a calm sea state, is substantial. The radar cross-section, which had been the destroyer's beam, collapsed to its minimum as the ship turned bow on, and the contact's own radar picture suddenly showed a ship that appeared to have gotten significantly smaller while simultaneously accelerating toward them. The center boat's camera was presumably still running. Whatever footage it captured in the next 40 seconds was going to be different from the footage the IRGCN commander had briefed his crews to collect. At 3:12 a.m. and 31 seconds, the Paul Hamilton's Mark 45 fired 2 warning rounds, aimed into the water 600 meters ahead of the center contact, each round producing the displaced water column and acoustic signature that constitutes the most unambiguous possible communication available to a warship short of an actual engagement. At 3:12 a.m. and 44 seconds, the center boat throttled back. At 3:12 a.m. and 51 seconds, the port flanking boat turned west. At 3:13 a.m. and 08 seconds, the starboard flanking boat followed. The center boat held its position for another 22 seconds, which is a long 22 seconds when you are 2.1 nautical miles from a destroyer that has just turned bow on at full speed and fired warning shots into the water ahead of you, but which is also, from the perspective of the tactical action officer watching the track, the specific pause of a commander who is not quite ready to accept that the geometry of the morning has stopped working in his favor. At 3:13 a.m. and 30 seconds, the center boat turned northwest and accelerated away. The Paul Hamilton tracked all 3 contacts until they cleared the strait's northern margin at 3:31 a.m. The SH-60B, which had reached flight quarters and was ready for launch, was stood down at 3:17 a.m. when all 3 contacts had turned north and were clearly not maneuvering back into the picture. The starboard shaft anomaly continued to show the same minor vibration reading it had shown at 2:57 a.m. within operational parameters. Recommend monitoring. The engineering watch updated the log at 3:45 a.m. No change, no action required. Now, the intelligence package. The SLQ-32 had been collecting from the moment the first contact appeared. What it collected was, in several respects, more valuable than the engagement itself. The fire control radar characterization from the 3:11 a.m. activation was the priority product. The specific emitter had been characterized once before, assessed at medium confidence due to a brief prior collection window. The 3-second sweep here was sufficient for the SLQ-32 to capture frequency, pulse repetition interval, scan width, and a modulation characteristic the earlier collection had noted, but not fully resolved. The library entry upgraded from medium to high confidence. High confidence means the next engagement solution calculated against that radar is built on accurate parameters. The difference between an engagement that works and one that works reliably. The distinction matters when margins are seconds. The clear voice coordination intercept produced a behavioral and procedural profile for Peykaap-II operations richer than anything previously in the database. Frequency used, brevity codes, coordination language between center and flanking boats. Future analysis of IRGCN fast boat intercepts would have this engagement as a reference. Pattern recognition improves with sample size. The fire control radar activation had also produced a secondary flag. Emission strength slightly higher than expected for the assessed contact range. Either the range estimate was slightly off, or the transmitter was running at an elevated power setting relative to documented baseline. Possible operator selection, possible equipment modification. The distinction matters. A modified transmitter changes the library entry. The analysts flagged it as indeterminate, pending corroboration. The flag was logged. The next time a Peykaap-II fire control radar activates in 5th Fleet's collection envelope, the analysts will be looking for that power characteristic. At 3:47 a.m., the Paul Hamilton returned to the eastbound traffic separation lane and resumed escort position with the VLCC tanker, which had continued northeast during the contact period at the slightly reduced speed its master had elected upon receiving the Paul Hamilton's advisory on the escort frequency. The tanker's crew had monitored the situation, maintained their lane, and had not been required to do anything except continue driving a very large ship in the direction it was already going. The tanker reached the Gulf of Oman approach at 5:15 a.m. The Paul Hamilton's escort tasking concluded at the formal handoff point, and she turned to take up her next assignment. The after-action report took the tactical action officer 2 hours to write. He estimated 1 hour and 45 minutes. The discrepancy is the standard arithmetic of naval reporting. The events take less time than the documentation, and the documentation always expands to claim whatever time remains after the events. In the report's intelligence annex, he noted that the IRGCN operation had been assessed as a media production exercise rather than a genuine engagement attempt, based on the clear voice communications intercept describing the mission objective as footage collection. He noted that the fire control radar activation was inconsistent with this assessment and required separate treatment as a potential escalation indicator. He noted both things because both things were true simultaneously, which is the characteristic complexity of IRGCN harassment operations. They are simultaneously less dangerous than they appear and more legally ambiguous than they would prefer to be. By 7 a.m., Iranian state television had a report. The report described a deterrence patrol that had confronted an American destroyer and forced it to change course. Footage showed 3 fast boats at speed in the strait, a warship visible at distance. The footage was real. The interpretation wrapped around it was, for a viewer with access to the Paul Hamilton's track data, creatively ambitious. The Paul Hamilton had changed course twice. The report did not specify that the second course change was bow-on at full speed, directly at the center boat, or that the footage collected during that approach showed a destroyer getting larger at high speed in the center boat's forward sector. That footage did not appear in the broadcast. It would have complicated the narrative. The gap between what got broadcast and what the Paul Hamilton's deck log shows happened is, on this morning, approximately as wide as the 2.1 nautical miles of Strait of Hormuz water that separated the bow-on destroyer from the center boat when the center boat decided that the footage operation had run its useful course. The Paul Hamilton continued her patrol. The strait continued moving oil. The tanker reached its destination on schedule delivering 2.1 million barrels of Saudi crude to a refinery that was unaware anything had happened in the strait that morning. The starboard shaft anomaly resolved itself by the next watch. The engineering officer noted it in the maintenance log as transient vibration, self-correcting, no action required. 3 lines. The engagement that preceded it took 37 paragraphs to document. The IRGCN will run another operation like this. The geometry of the strait invites it, the doctrine requires it, and the propaganda value, even when the footage comes out sideways, is assessed as positive by the people who plan these things. They will look at the footage, note the Paul Hamilton's course changes, and in the official accounting, declare the mission a demonstration of Iranian capability. They will not have access to the SLQ-32 log. They will not know that the fire control radar characterization upgraded a library entry from medium to high confidence. They will not know that the clear voice communications intercept produced a behavioral profile that will make future Peykaap-II coordination easier to read. They will not know that the power anomaly in the fire control radar's transmitter is sitting in an analyst's active file as an open question awaiting corroboration. They will know what the camera saw. What the camera saw and what actually happened are separated by the distance between a coordinated 3-boat encirclement that was supposed to generate footage of American retreat and a destroyer that turned bow on at full speed and fired warning rounds into the water ahead of the lead boat. Iranian state media will continue to broadcast the footage that supports the narrative. Somewhere in the Strait of Hormuz, another watch team is reading the overnight intelligence summary that includes the Paul Hamilton's after-action product, updating their threat picture with the fire control radar characterization, and noting the open question about the transmitter power anomaly. The strait runs northeast. The oil moves east. The water is the same flat black it was at 3:08 a.m. 3 boats tried something. 1 destroyer turned around and drove at them. That is, at its irreducible core, the entire story. Bye for now.